If you're a Pittsburgh baseball fan, then this is the podcast for you. Make your way down, grab a beverage, and get ready to talk Pirates with myself, Craig Toth, and Scott Jackson, two of the biggest fans you'll ever meet. This is Bucks in the Basement.
Now I see the changes in this town. They change, they say one thing, but then the next day it's different. They change, but they don't know what they want. All they do is change. Going left, going right, travel day, travel night. That's where we'll go. No excuses, no goodbyes, no one cries, no one lies. We'll never know.
Pirates made some moves that made a lot of fans happy, surprised, and then obviously thinking about the fact that there are still going to be some holes that need to be filled because players out, you need players to come in because realistically, there aren't a whole lot of major league ready options. We're going to talk about all of that. But first off, Scott, how you doing, brother?
I'm good. Happy Thanksgiving. Looking forward to filling my belly this week and keeping an eye because we know that Ben Cherington likes to make moves around holidays. So I'll have a fork in one hand and my phone in the other, keeping an eye on Twitter.
Yeah, definitely some alerts. I can remember the Josh Bell trade on Christmas Eve was a little bit of a shock, but yeah, he definitely does. I don't know if he decides to make those moves when people aren't looking, but it definitely seems to be a pattern with him. But like I said, they did make a decision. There were two names that, kind of everybody was coming up with, ourselves included, that kind of were those real non-tender candidates. We had conversations about David Bednar, but, realistically thinking that he would be tendered. And we saw before, when the Pirates tendered Brian Reynolds, there was just some little bit arguments back and forth, and Bob Nutting stepped in and was able to get a deal put together where it wasn't really an extension, but was buying out some of those RB years. It's something you've brought up, and I wouldn't rule that out. Right now, it's just like, okay, we want you back. Okay, let's get down and let's talk about, there's like a time, I think it's sometime in January where they have to exchange numbers. But for the time being, they can still discuss anytime up until then. But Brian De La Cruz is out, estimated to receive $4 million. Connor Joe, man, like I said last time we recorded, I just kind of thought that was the direction they were going just because – I've seen, Billy Cook as a younger, cheaper option, and you may get with, more defense and less bat, you may get some of that production because Connor Joe realistically is kind of like a utility guy, was overused at times by the Pirates. And I shot you a message right away, and I was just like, I really can't believe that they non-tender De La Cruz because I just didn't think that Ben Cherington was going to see those 21 home runs and just think, we can replace that somewhere else.
Yeah, we've been talking about it for a couple of weeks now, and I really didn't think that he would get non-tendered for that same kind of reason. The Pirates seem to covet the control and these younger players and feel like they can bring the best out of them. And 21 home runs is nothing to sneeze at, even if 18 of them came in Miami. And I think that this might be uh, the foreshadowing of something to come. They maybe have a plan. I hope they have a plan. I hope that they have, like we talked about, um, an idea for filling that hole because, yeah, you got to fill the hole when you let players go. So I guess we can look at this in a positive light and say that bigger and better things may be coming to right field at PNC Park.
Hopefully. And before we hopped on here, I was never a proponent of Brian De La Cruz, as that option. I wanted them to aim higher. But we recorded right after the trades happened, um, and did see it as kind of like, if Brian De La Cruz, he's not a great player, if he keeps doing what he had been doing for the first part of the season there, that it would be okay. And I went back and I looked at those numbers today, Scott, and I mean, it was basically, I think that, yeah, they did maybe not aim super high. I don't know, what trades were out there and what they possibly could have gotten done. Uh, Randy Rosarena was a big name that people were talking about. He was a $10.5 million arbitration guy last year. And, you know, the Pirates, obviously, I mean, Ben Cherington has said it, had to make some trades. Martin Perez going off to be able to bring in, and make the move to get IKF signed, so there's a lot of different things. So would they have done that? Jazz Chisholm, it kind of seemed like the Marlins had an eye on, a catcher within the Yankees farm system. And yeah, we didn't have that guy. So yes, that's on Ben Cherington for not having that guy to maybe, be expendable. If you had Henry and both Endy and you had picked up Joey Bar and you had all these guys playing well, then maybe that could have existed. But I mean, you can't manufacture a trade if it's not in the eyes of what the other team wants. But I mean, right field when Brian De La Cruz came in was an absolute black hole. I looked on Fangraphs today, and up until the trade, they were the second worst rated right field by FWAR. They were -2. The only team that was worse, no surprise, the Chicago White Sox, but they were only at -2.1. So the Pirates were fairly close. At the time he was coming in, he was slugging, I think it was like 417. Our right fielders were slugging 319, not hitting for any power. He had 18 home runs. We had 11 total home runs out of the right field, and I believe it was something like almost 200 more plate appearances. So I mean, if he comes in and just does what he had been doing all season, that's like a two-war, swing right there. You're getting, extra slug. We were striking out at I think it was like a 24.5% clip. He was striking out at 26% clip. So all the numbers were all very similar, except for that power and that offense. And it just really didn't come with him. Like I said, I wasn't a proponent of the move, but I don't think that it was like this awful chasm, horrible decision that it is now being, described to be in hindsight, because hindsight is 2020. If he performed well, and I mean, we even had an episode where, showing that in those 10 losses, it was more the pitching than the offense, that kind of caused that stuff. So yeah, I mean, and like you said, I was just surprised in the fact that they moved on and thought, okay, Connor Joe and Brian De La Cruz were pretty much right field. And right now, if you would look anywhere, it would be probably a platoon of Jack Sawinski and Billy Cook, which obviously is not the answer. So, I mean, you would hope that they have a plan A, a plan B, maybe C and D, if some of the other ones fall through, because we know in this free agent thing, it comes down to money, man. Whoever offers the most money, the best deal. We've talked about the options. We've talked about everything. I mean, the way that contracts are written nowadays is just super strange. So, I mean, it definitely, like I said, I believe both of these moves are good moves because they show that there should be something on the horizon. But, as a Pirates fan, I'm wondering what that will be.
Yeah, this definitely deepens the mystery for what they're going to do with Brian Reynolds. Is he going to play left? Is he going to play right? Is he going to play first? And I do wonder sometimes, because I don't listen to a lot of podcasts of other teams, do other teams talk about the financials in the same way that Pittsburgh does? I mean, it's like baked into our thought process after all of these years of, well, somebody might be a good fit, but they'll never spend the money on him. I was thinking, because I was looking at an X thread where the news came out today that Nolan Arenado was considering moving to first base, and somebody asked, "Well, on what team are you playing Nolan Arenado at first base if he gets traded?" And my initially thought was like, "Well, the Pirates would because they have Key Brian Hayes at third, and you have other players that play a better defensive first base." And then the reply from that initial fan was all the time was like, "We'll just go get Christian Walker if you're gonna play Arenado at first." And then my thought was like, well, they have to give up a draft pick, so they're not ever going to even consider it. So even if someone who is a good fit at a position, we have it baked into our thought process that the Pirates are not going to do it in that model. But yeah, that does come down to the money. It comes down to what are we going to do with Brian Reynolds? I think that that's kind of a logjam at this point because of that platoon that you were talking about, and thinking about PNC Park having that second center field in left. You have to have someone who essentially is a center fielder playing over there, someone who has the range. And as Brian Reynolds gets older, he loses that range. Now he has made up for it by improving his arm strength, so maybe he's a fit there in right. But then again, that still leaves a big open hole at first base, just like we've seen year after year after year. There's no solution at first base.
Yeah, and I think no matter which way you look at it, I mean, there's going to be a hole in the outfield. There's going to be a hole, possibly at first base. I mean, because if you move Brian Reynolds to right field, something they toyed with in spring training, and I mean, Derek Shelton made it seem like it was going to be like a more consistent thing. It never really played out that way. I mean, I think we talked about this before. It might have just been because of how bad Jack Sawinski was playing. So you couldn't really get that worked out as well, and you didn't have another person who could even play left field good, or it's not that Brian Reynolds played it well. I mean, by the defensive metrics, he was, the worst left fielder in baseball, aside from the arm and the outfield assists. But yeah, I mean, there would be other guys that would be doing worse over there. You couldn't move Connor Joe over there. You obviously couldn't move Edward Olivares over there. Once you have Brian De La Cruz come in, I mean, that guy can't even play right field. How is he going to play left field at PNC Park? So, I mean, that may have stunted their plans. But yeah, that's what it's kind of come down to is like, no matter what, you have two holes. You either have two holes in the outfield in right and left if you move Reynolds to first base, or you have a hole in one of the outfield positions and then first base again. I think that everybody, it seems to be, is kind of getting on the idea of Brian Reynolds playing first base. I think that he would be good at it. He's he's a workhorse. He's a guy that is probably still, out there like doing something where he's like having to like shag fly balls like out wherever he lives. I think he lives in Tennessee. He's just out like has a machine, just like, trying to read balls better and do different stuff. Like you said, they asked him to work on his arm, works on his arm, and has, leading the league in like outfield assists. So, I mean, I believe that he can do it. It definitely would answer a question because I don't know, like I said, internally, that's really not going to happen. And a lot of these guys that are out there are going to be, those 1 year options again. Like you said, a Christian Walker, they're not going to give the qualifying. They're not going to pay up for, a Pete Alonso. So you're once again just looking at, that 1 year fix.
Now, don't kill me on this, but this popped into my head. Do you revisit the Henry Davis right field experiment? Because in theory, giving him the proper time, it's a small right field. He's got a cannon for an arm. I mean, you should be able to. You threw Gregory Polanco there, for a while when he was a shell of his former self. Um, when they go on the road, it could be a little bit different, but you could maybe give Kutch some spells by DHing Henry if the bat comes. That's if the bat comes around. Yeah, that's a big part of it. But you have this bit of a logjam at catcher. Are they freeing up space there? We have in our head that they're going to go out and get somebody, but they may look internally and try this Henry Davis thing again.
And here's the thing is I think that Henry's kind of like very similar to Brian Reynolds in that aspect, that I think if he worked at it hard enough that he could he could turn himself into a right fielder just like he did with the catching. The catching at the beginning of the season was much better than I expected it to be because of all the work that he put in, during the offseason. And but then in the same breath, did all of that work during the offseason and not taking time off, did that cause him to maybe just come out of the gate a little bit slow? And not these guys, they do take those breaks just because you kind of do need it because the season is a grind, and he really didn't. He was traveling back and forth from Seattle to work on his hitting, back down to Bradenton, to work on his catching, was calling up all the players. I know he called Jared Jones, a few other people, and said, get down here, we're working, and all this kind of stuff. So, I mean, maybe it was a little bit much. I think that it's almost like you just have to make that decision and stick with it. If they would have told us, Henry Davis struggled in right field in 2023, but we're going to tell him to work on being a right fielder for the entire offseason, I would have had no problems with it and came in with 2024 as him being one of the options in right field and, like you said, some DH and whatever it may be, and not taking the catching and saying, that's never going to happen, but at least putting a foot forward in that direction, and just saying, focus on this, Henry, and just work on this. But right now, it just kind of seems like that. I mean, right now you have, and that's a discussion we could, easily flow into, is that you have Joey Bart, who, had a good season, was injured a little bit at times, but, is he going to be able to repeat that? I would hope so. And then you have Endy coming back. You have Henry. You have Jason DeLay sitting down there. Yeah, if Joey doesn't perform like he did last year, Endy doesn't come back completely healthy, Henry continues to struggle, and then you have Jason DeLay. I mean, all of a sudden, a position of depth and strength turns into, just one big jumbled mess, kind of like how right field turned into this year when we thought they may have had a possible answer in Edward Olivares because he had performed well in Kansas City. I mean, he was a guy that got, 300 and some plate appearances. I think he had like 13, 15 home runs, something like that, and was thinking, okay, if he can do that and, maybe increase that a little bit, then we might have found an answer on the cheap. And then all of a sudden that just blows up. And I mean, we're in the situation we are right now.
Yeah, and you didn't expect Jack Sawinski to fall off a cliff like he did. You thought that he was going to be part of that process, that they would have choices, that they maybe wouldn't have to go sign a Michael A. Taylor so late into spring training to fill a gap there. I think with the catching situation, I mean, Joey Bart has the same kind of pedigree that you would think for Henry Davis, because he was a second overall pick in the year he was drafted, and so I think that he's another guy that can put in the work and can continue to get better. I think maybe he was a little rushed to the majors when Buster Posey decided to sit out the COVID year, so that may have stunted some of his development, at least delayed it a little bit. And you have Endy coming back from the Tommy John surgery, which we saw a little bit of him in the minors last year. He very easily could start the season in the minors to build back up, and then you have Jason DeLay, who will eventually be the odd man out probably. He's good enough as a backup catcher. You're not embarrassed to have him in the lineup a couple days a week. But I think that they may try to sort these things out. I mean, Henry is a 1-1, and even though he was a strategic 1-1, not necessarily the consensus number one talent in that draft, he still is a 1 of 1, and you don't just give up on those guys.
Yeah, I mean, you really can't. And I mean, I know that there are a ton of guys like those quote unquote quad A players that can, crush the crap out of the ball in AAA and then just, can't put together, when they get to the majors. But it's just so strange to see because I mean, he really has hit like at every level. He's done, everything that's been asked of him. And then when he gets up to the majors, and I know that, there was a lot of discussions about there being like the biggest gap from, AAA to the majors this year and different stuff like that. But I mean, he performed well at every level. I mean, just like excelled. And to see a guy just kind of, put their foot on the brake like that, where they can't get out of their own way, it's definitely crazy to see. I mean, like I said, if they would say, we talked to Henry, at Thanksgiving dinner and said, you're gonna play, we're gonna try you out in the outfield again and you focus on that, would I think, yeah, I mean, I'd like to see an upgrade out there and a more sure thing, but I wouldn't be upset with the idea of, you know, like I said, going with the position and sticking with it. And then hopefully, other teams have done this. I mean, we're talking about the Royals. MJ Melendez plays out in the outfield. His outfield isn't that great. His hitting has struggled at times, but I mean, they put him out there because they wanted to get his bat in the lineup, and they have Salvador Perez. So, I mean, there's other teams that kind of do that as well. So, I mean, it's not out of the realm of possibilities for me. But then, like I said, once again, you have Henry Davis, you have Jack Swinski, and you have Billy Cook for an outfield spot, and to me, it just has to be better than that. It really does. It's just weird to me that, I mean, it seemed like, oh God, like 2 or 3 years ago, it seemed like we had an abundance of outfielders, and now we have none. I mean, we've seen Smith and Jigba come through, and we've seen, Swaggerty kind of fizzle out. But I mean, it just seemed like there was a lot of these options and guys that we kept on saying, well, they could at least be a fourth outfielder. And now, it kind of seems like that we have Brian Reynolds, who, in spite of, his shortcomings in left field, is a starting outfielder in Major League Baseball. Uno Cruz, I believe, in center field, we will be a starting outfielder. But then after that, you have a bunch of guys that it's like, yeah, they're pretty much like a fourth outfielder or a platoon guy right now. And that's just like, it's so weird to me. And to have that in, an outfield position and then also at first base. But I mean, that's a Pirates curse right there, other than, a couple months of Josh Bell and then the whole way back to Kevin Young. And, I mean, we had John Jaso playing there, for God's sake. I mean, so like, do you know what I mean? Like, it's definitely been crazy. And moving Pedro over there to kind of find a position, and he had one good year there.
Well, when Brad Eldred didn't pan out, that kind of was the death knell there. Big Country we had a lot of hopes on him. And to say that moving Henry into right field isn't trying to give an out for Cherington or letting them, fix the problem on the cheap. But maybe if you can plug those holes in internal ways, and that maybe you can go spend a little bit more money. But I don't even know if it's the money that's the issue. It's the risk. And we know that Bob Nutting does not like to take risks. And that could be the biggest hurdle for the Pirates to find that solution for more than just 1 year or half a season. If you want to have some kind of consistency at these positions, you have to pay and you have to take risk.
Yeah, and the crazy thing is, to me, I don't know, while we were talking here, and I think it's something we talked about, like maybe in a side conversation before, maybe not on the show, was I was thinking, how did Ben Cherington get Bob Nutting to make Shoto Imanaga like what was seen in the industry as like a legitimate offer, and that some people reported that it possibly could have been more money, and I don't know if it was more years, less years, or whatever it may be, than what the Cubs offered. You would think that they could find a position player, whether it be an outfielder or whoever it may be, first baseman or whatever, that you could talk Bob Nutting or whatever you would need to, whatever you're calling it, that Cherington's doing, but to be able to get him to make that type of offer. Because, yeah, I mean, obviously, I think if Imanaga signs here, then we're probably not signing, probably not signing Perez. We're probably not trading, maybe not trading for Marco Gonzalez, whatever it may be. So there would be a little bit less money here and there. But, based on what Imanaga got, I mean, we would have been spending well over what, we ended up spending last year on players. So that's my thing is that, like, how did he get him to do that? Because that would have been, a little bit of a fairly risky move. So, I mean, I don't know. It's at some point in time, you are going to have to pay up if you cannot develop it internally. Because I mean, the ultimate job of the GM is to be successful and to make his team successful, or you don't have a job. You look at some of the other guys where it's just like, well, yeah, he got fired as a GM, and there are guys that will get second chances and different stuff like that. But then, most of those guys have at least had, some semblance of success in the past 10 years. So, I mean, I don't know. It's just very weird. They're going to have to step up. They're going to have to do something. I mean, but I will say I do like what they're doing on the reliever market, and I know it's a silly little thing because I mean I don't like to focus on the bullpen as much, um, because it's like I said they're just so finicky, they're so fickle. But as we saw last year, when your bullpen's not performing well and is blowing those leads late, then I mean that's the difference between 76 and maybe 82 wins. So I mean it's definitely something that needs to be focused on, but doing it on the cheap, two minor league deals, trading for a player for cash considerations, and a guy that is going to be making, league minimum, um, all guys with major experience, Johan getting it on the biggest stage in baseball. It's and what is it? You have another guy that's been through like the Blue Jays and the Rangers organization, another guy coming from the Guardians. So these guys are have been with good organizations. These are the types of moves that can be like sneaky good to kind of like maybe not put. It's not going to be the one that puts the team over the top,
Mm-hmm.
but it could be the types of moves that could keep the team from crumbling in the second half of the season like the Pirates did this year.
Yeah, well, those like we talked about with that losing streak. If you just had one guy that could stop the bleeding in some of those games, just get a couple of outs at the right time, eh, that could have made the whole difference and stop that streak. Picked up a couple extra wins. We have a completely different feel for the team going into the off season. The bullpen is very important to this success of this team. But I agree. We've talked about it for weeks in a row here that getting it on the cheap, just these little trades, these waiver claims, it's the way to go because they are so finicky and the guys can get hot, they get cold, and you feel like you're obligated to these arms if you're spending millions of dollars to them with them. Um, where just interchanging them, plugging and playing, and working through depth in your minor leagues and DFAing guys. That's to me, and when I look at roster construction, that's how I prefer to have my bullpen built too.
Yeah, and I would like to go, see them go out and get a sort of like a more stable, maybe a little bit more proven arm.
Chapman's
Um,
available.
yeah, I mean, definitely still need a lefty at some point in time here, a reliable lefty, hopefully. I'm still going to stick on the Joey Wentz train at least a little bit. If I'm wrong on that, I'm wrong. But like I said, I've seen the Pirates do this with many a reliever before, many a pitcher before, where they can at least resurrect their career or whatever it may be, even if it's for a season. So I mean, I think that, and at least in my eyes, I think that they see him as an option, or they wouldn't have picked him up so late in the season. He could have been a casualty at this point in time already. I mean, not that the Pirates need to make space just yet. They're only at, I think, 36 right now on the 40 man. So, and you've still got, oh God, Trey Cabbage, and what's the other guy's name? I think I forgot it already. It's like
Tristan
it's,
Gray.
Tristan Gray, look at that. Yeah, so Tristan Gray and Trey Cabbage got Joshua Palacios. I mean, there's a lot of other guys that could be that lineup or that roster fodder at some point in time. I'm not saying they're going to be. Yeah, I would like to see them go out and get a more stable relief pitcher, a guy who's been in the league for a little bit, a guy who knows what he's doing, doesn't fold under pressure. But like you said, even if you do that, it doesn't guarantee that they are going to perform well. That's the thing
Palacios,
is,
well, I'm surprised he didn't come up in our outfield discussion. Palacios, he just slips my mind a lot too. But yeah,
yeah, and I mean he was in like kind of competition last year at the end of spring training, got injured, then took a while to come back. I think that's another guy that's yeah. If we're talking about the outfielder, that's to me that's like another fourth outfielder. He's a guy that's athletic enough to play all the positions, not play them exceptionally well, and but also provides something that is it's good to have within a team. Like he has that energy, he has that spark, he has the personality, and everybody seems to like him. He's that's other stuff that needs to happen because I mean, you're going to look at a team like the Pirates, and there is no way that our 26 man is going to be made of like 23 all stars. Do you know what I mean? You are going to have some of these role players and stuff. And if it's a guy that can step up and step in like he did, a couple years ago in big situations and
hmm
get you some key wins, then he will be he'll be a folk hero within, Pirates lore.
that's something I keep telling people that like at work. They talk about, oh, they need to give Palacios more time. They need to. He comes through with he has that big personality, and he comes through in the clutch. And because of those big moments that he has, you forget that he is a low 200 hitter.
It's something that's not very easy to forget, but it definitely it can be forgotten. Especially, I mean, there's not as many people. I know this. I know there's a decent amount of Pirates podcasts out there and stuff like that, but people that dig into the team and stuff as much as like me and you and some others, where if if somebody turns on the game and sees him hit a walk off, it's just like, oh man, he must be having a pretty good season, and haven't watched what happened, for the rest of his time here. But he does. There are some things that are better than the numbers, but you can't have a bunch of those guys who have these qualities that are supposed to be above the numbers. It's like, no, at some point in time, we need a decent amount of guys in the lineup that have the numbers.
There are people I talk to that will tell you they will swear up and down they need to just dump. They need to DFA Henry Davis and give all of his time to Joshua Palacios. And I was like, no, come on, like look a little deeper than that.
Yeah,
But you know,
please don't make
yeah,
please
I
don't
don't
make me
need.
have this conversation with you.
Here's the whiteboard. I'm gonna start making notes. I'm gonna draw the graphs for you and everything. Yeah. But that's the point. I mean, these are people that watch a lot of the games too, but that don't dig in as deep as you and I do and look at some of the underlying things.
Yeah, and that's where kind of all this comes. And like I said, Pirates are making many moves here. I do like the kind of the direction they're going. But at the beginning of this episode, you wished everybody a happy Thanksgiving, and I will do the same. But before we go, I know that we kind of wanted to talk about it. And we know this is a little bit cheesy, and it's but it's something that I think as as people, as fans, as whatever, we need to take kind of a moment and kind of talk about what we're thankful for. And since Scott, you had a list in front of you, you showed me before. I'm gonna let you lead this off, and then I'm gonna clean it up at the end.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I was just thinking today about this is the time of year where we reflect and express gratitude and think about the things that we're thankful for. And I know that you and I both spend time on social media in the Pirates Twitter sphere or whatever you want to call it, where there can be a sense of negativity. And I thought, well, let's just bring some positivity in this week of thanks and think about what we're thankful for as Pirate fans and what we think, is worth taking a moment to reflect upon. For me personally, I'm thankful that not just in the last couple of years, but throughout my time watching the Pirates, I've been able to watch promising young prospects develop, and whether they have their success elsewhere or in the black and gold, I think that as someone who has spent time in their career hiring and training and developing people that you work with, there's a sense of accomplishment and a sense of pride in watching other people grow and develop. And so guys, currently like Skeens, who was pretty much a finished product, but watching guys like Jared Jones, Nick Gonzalez, O'Neill Cruz coming from the low minors, or in some cases being drafted to come to the major leagues and having success. Seeing something like the way Mitch Keller persevered, and we got to the point where he was so down, and we all rooted for him, and we saw him turn the corner and figure it out, and you just feel so good for when he signed his extension, and he knew that he was taking that next step in his life. So that's been very rewarding over the course of my time watching the Pirates. Another thing that I'm thankful for is PNC Park. It's nice to have a beautiful, family friendly place to be able to go and watch the sport we love. And even though I, as well as you, have weathered some really rough seasons of watching this team, there's not a better place that we could do it.
Absolutely not. I don't think even in a losing game I've ever had a bad time at PNC Park. And I know that people would say, well, you're giving Nutting all this money and blah 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 with that type of stuff. But I mean, for me, there's nothing like sitting at the ballpark, having a beer, getting a hot dog, some nachos, whatever is your choice, and just enjoying baseball. And for me, there's three things that came to mind for me as far as a Pirates fan, and especially as a Pirates fan this year. There's three things that I'm thankful for. The first thing I'm thankful for was being able to take my three kiddos to Paul Skeen's debut and for them to see what PNC Park can be like when a city is behind the team, because it's something that my daughter experienced. I mean, she's 17, so she experienced it when she was probably too young to actually, recognize what was going on. But them being able to see, like I said, what it's like when, everybody is hanging on every pitch and giving standing ovations for every time it gets to two strikes was an absolutely amazing experience. The second thing I am thankful for is I'm thankful that Scott decided to jump on this brand and to kind of like put his faith in me, put his faith in himself, to get back on here and start podcasting again. And with Chris being busy with the other stuff that he does, Scott has been absolutely amazing and has kind of renewed my energy kind of into this podcast, doing a lot more researching again, different stuff. So Scott, I'm very thankful you decided to do this. And then number three is a sad one, but a happy one. I'm thankful that my buddy Joe and I were able to take our buddy Ryan to the Hall of Fame game. Ryan unfortunately fought to the end, but in the end, colon cancer won, and that he passed away a couple weeks ago. But back in August, he ate all the nachos his doctor told him not to eat. He drank all the pop his doctor told him not to. We sat in the stands and talked baseball for a day, watched the fireworks. And for one day, he wasn't really in pain. So I'm very thankful for that. I'm grateful that we were able to get that time with him. And I'm grateful for everybody that tunes in and listens to this. And once again, Scott, thank you so much for jumping on and doing this, brother.
Yeah, thank you for having me. I never expected when I agreed to do the guest spot so many months ago while you were on vacation that it would turn into this. But I'm so happy that you took a chance on me, and I really appreciate the opportunity.
Absolutely, brother.
Now I see the changes in this town. They change, they say